I hear something to bump to, something to get drunk to, something to get high, take a ride and get to. Hear something to bump to, something to get drunk to, something to get back and smoke a blunt to. Hear something to bump to, something to get drunk to, something to get high, take a ride and get to. Hear something to bump to, something to get drunk to, something to get back and smoke a blunt to.
Ando yo bien loco, me siento bien tripeado. Todo lo que miro es la hierba a mi lado. Los toques van pasando, la pipa va rolando. Sigo yo bien loco, ya no sé qué estoy pensando. Mirando alrededor y las vainas están bailando. Los homies están pisteando, quieren pleito, digan cuándo.
Alright, we're getting a person shot at 3334 in Evergreen. 422, you guys are okay over there? Someone shot there. Alright, is your victim at the
You
hospital?
know all things, and we give you all thanks. In the name of Yeshua, we pray.
Amen.
Amen. So my name's Arcemio. I 30 years old. I've lived in Yuma, Arizona. Grew up in Somerton. Born, let's say that, born in Yuma, Arizona. Grew up in Somerton. Moved around a lot as a kid through Yuma and Somerton with my mom. Growing up as a kid, at least with me, myself, the way I was raised with my mother was a interesting thing just because my mom didn't raise us to have a belief, let's just say a God, or the God that I know of now, right? But um, yeah, I think it's important that you understand that part, but it's if we're gonna get into the story, like it's gonna be important that you have a little bit of knowledge, at least of how I got to my dark valley, the valley that we go through. Growing up as a kid, at least for with my mom, being a single mother, with the father not there, it was difficult. Like most homes in the 90s, growing up was, even if it felt poor, it felt rich because of my mother's love. So a lot of that assisted me. It assisted me not realizing that we were really poor. My mom's love was that, with a lot of flaws that my mother had as an individual, with the many kids that she had, I'm sorry, that it was something still that I can go back to my memories and say that I had good memories in childhood. But with that, with anything, you also have bad. If there is a good, then there's a bad. And the bad that I went through as a child definitely allowed me to go through life with a lot of valleys, in particular, a lot of lonely ones, lonely, dark valleys that I thought I shouldn't have gone through as a child, that I thought no child should experience, you know, and that's a whole nother side of the story, that we can go to. But having that childhood as a second oldest of seven from my mother, from my mother's side, oldest four from my father's side, since my mother and my father were not married, they were never divorced. It just never worked. I think it's important for me to have a respect and a love for my father, regardless of his absence in my life. Growing up, uh, I would refer to him as my dad, yeah, but I always thought of him as the highlight in certain circles with certain friends, depending on what age I was, because of my father's history in the 90s and growing up in the early 2000s. It was the environment was very different. Respect was different. The streets were different and the environment was different. So when you had a certain family member that was respected for certain things, you didn't shame away from that. Sure, there's people that didn't like that, but in the environment, especially in Somerton, you didn't shy away from the fact that that was your father, because in the streets, that way we grew up, is that you honored someone as his statue of what he had done in his darkness, in his valleys, and his times. And um, but I'm getting to know him now as an adult, and and I love him. My mom has always been around. Let's just like make that frank. Like my mom was always around, but there was moments where I also made it really hard on her. I was really rebellious, even if at the moment I didn't understand I was outbursting for whatever I was going through. I was really rebellious against my mother. I was really a thick-headed, I was a troublemaker. I was a really troublemaker. I would give her problems with my other siblings as well. I wasn't just a troublemaker on my own. I was bringing them in or causing her trouble with, the way I would treat them, whichever way you might look at it. But my mother understood that she couldn't do it alone. Like, what woman really thinks they can do it alone, right? They do it alone. That's different from really thinking I can do this alone, right? My mother did it alone, but my grandmother, which is my father's mother, really had a big hand in helping me as a kid. Um, when the moments when my mom couldn't, not because of my attitude, but really because financially or just moving around a lot. We moved around a lot, not having my father in the home, not having someone that was a father figure there that was ready and giving and playing the role that he should play as any man that's a father. But I think all that together, moving around a lot, I didn't really have a lot of stability. Always were moving around a lot of schools. I remember having so much friends, but at the same time, always having to get to know new people, new friends was always. That's probably why I am how I am in a way. Honestly, like if the people that know me know how I am. But um, our culture, the Hispanic, or more to be more particular, the Chicano Mexican American culture in the west or southwest of the United States, if you're not knowing from what I'm talking about, Arizona, California, Southern Arizona, you have this culture of at that time in the 90s that was the normal thing. The streets, the life, at least for the most part, poor families, poor Mexican families, it was normal. My neighborhood where I grew up, it was okay for the next guy to have five cousins and six aunts and uncles that were all associated with the streets in some way. And that goes vice versa. There was just a town full of that family related to the streets and their cousins and aunts and all that intertwined together, and you just knew everybody. That's where we grew up. That's how we grew up. Um, my mother didn't try to say it was okay to be part of the streets, but my mother also understood that she was herself an environment of where she was at. She was in the environment because that's all that was around her. Um, so it wasn't a secret of mine, but I think the question is like, when did I really become alive to, hey, this is the streets, this is the street life, and this is what it is. I think it was as early as maybe sixth grade, but to where I can really catch it, I think it was like eighth grade. I'm be really frank, to where I can really recall vivid memories is eighth grade. I was living wild. Like I think that's like an understatement, to be quite honest. Living really wild. I didn't have a sense of a real authority. By a certain age, my grandma was always working in the fields at a certain time when I lived with her. At this time in eighth grade in particular, I was living with her because of the fact that I was a handful already by this time, and my mother didn't send me away. I wanted to be away. I would tell my mother literally that I wanted to be an adult. I believe as much every youngster thinks they know it all. I believe that wholeheartedly, that I knew exactly what I needed, that I didn't need my mother no longer. That's what I believed. I believed that to the core at that moment. I'm at that age that I didn't need my mother. I didn't need nobody. I got it figured out. I knew enough of what was going on in the streets to be able to do something for myself. I think it's important for you to understand that right now, I know this, but I didn't know this then. And this is what I'm about to say. I know this now, that God was with me when I decided to enter the streets, even before I decided to enter the streets, while I was in the streets, as I left the streets, even as I now speak of the streets, God is still there. I've understood that now. But then, one time that I can recall was when I was shot at. It was so many times, but that one time in particular, um, we had gotten set up. I was in those days they would refer to as dogs. We were those type of people, not because not because we were pets, but because we went after everything and anything. We're talking about death at your doorstep. We're talking about death knocking in your ear, telling you I'm taking you today. and I was away from God. And in that car, as the bullets went through the car, not one bullet touched me. That much I can say. And I have other witnesses. I don't have to go there, but my situation at hand at that very moment, darkness was right in front of me. I was not just walking through it, it was challenging me. It was trying to take me. After that, after getting out of that situation and a friend getting hit and me not getting hit and understanding, and even now, I still get a little teary eyed because of the fact that it's so raw and real. That God, though someone was injured because of what happened, God was protecting what He had for me now, and He still protected what He had for my friend. Though we go through this valley and we end up with no limbs or some limbs or all limbs when we get out, the purpose of the valley is to know that God is right there. He's not what people tell me He is. He's just not. He was in the car with me when I wasn't thinking about Him. I was a 16-year old, almost 17. He was right there with me when I was blaspheming in my heart, thinking rotten in my mind, doing every sin imaginable that I could at that very moment, at that age, living the lifestyle that I was living. You can't tell me God wasn't there. And I can recall into detail calling certain people, doing certain things right after, things that are the streets, and yet my God was with me. I went through a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness as a kid. I don't know why. I think I became so involved with myself that if you weren't with me, then that means you're against me, right? So if you weren't for me, giving me something, benefiting me somehow, then that means you're not for me, really, because you would have been giving me something. And I was just like, I'll either push you away or you're dead to me. That was my situation. And a lot of kids do that now. I see it now, right? You close yourself up to the world because the world is cold. But get to know God for yourself in the valley, in the mountain when you're at your highest peak in your lives. Get to know Him while you're climbing the mountain, if you're going into the valley, while you're exiting the valley, while you're in the valley. That's what I suggest. That's what I give. I can't talk to your depression. I'm not those Christians. I'm not a fake person to tell you, oh, your depression doesn't exist. You go ahead and give me $4.99 right now, or go ahead and say this prayer is gonna go away. But what I will tell you is that He's right there in that depression with you, that He's right there with you in that anxiety, that He's right there with you in that worry and that anger and that bitterness. And to truly believe when people tell you, give it to God, truly give it to Him, because He's right there in the deepest of darkest of valleys, in the deepest of darkest of worries and depressions. He's right there. I was always involved in something, selling. I was always a seller before I got saved. The reason I bring this up is because it's going to be important for the entire story. I was big on the marijuana at that time. It was a thing that wasn't as researched. The stuff that you see now, obviously, it's nothing like that back when we were growing up, and um, we were big. We were big on it. When I say we, I'm talking about me and my circle that I had at that moment, the people I was around, um, people that I still love now to this day. Um, I love them dearly. They're still dear friends of mine. But they can testify to the moment where I got saved because we were all in a circle. And at that moment, enjoying marijuana. We were about 19 years old, I believe. Or, yeah, about 19, give or take 20. And we were in our spot. We all had a spot in our spot we were at. And it was the same for. But at that very moment, we were doing what we did, you know, doing those activities that typically people were doing at that time. And I remember we knew the project where it was from. I think I'm going to explain this as well because it wasn't a tripped out experience. People are sometimes comments can come out and people, unbelievers or people that are atheists, want to come out and say, "Oh, it's because he had a tripped out experience of what he was smoking." I knew where I was getting my stuff. I knew it was at exactly. It was California, where it was at, where it was from. It was everything was legit. The reason I say this is because we're rolling and we're enjoying our time. And I start feeling a really deep, hard, and like a cut feeling. I've been cut before, also because of the street lifestyle and things like that. I started feeling like a deep cut in my heart. Like it was weird. I've never been cut in my heart, but I felt the feeling of cut in my heart. Let's just put it that way. Sorry. And I was like, what's going on? Like I really, really was kind of tripping. In my mind, I was thinking, why? That's what I mean by tripping. Like, why am I feeling that? But we continued with our enjoying of what we were doing, and we were listening to music and everything, and we were preparing ourselves for we're gonna go out to our actual party. And I was always about being the life of the party. I really enjoyed the scenery, like being involved, all that. And I remember that my best friends at the time, and they understood what I was going through in my life. They understood all that. And I was like, hey, I want to go already. Let's go. And they're like, hey, hold on. We have to wait. And, giving me the excuses of why, but they were very valid. I just wanted to go. But I remember that I started feeling that again. As I asked to go, I felt it again. My heart being cut. And it wasn't hurting like, ow. It was just, I knew it was there. And then I just heard, look at your friends. And mind you, we're sitting like this. One, two, three, four. Just like this. And and it's a voice that I wouldn't say it's an audible voice. I wouldn't even say it's an audible voice. It was something that I understood was being said to me without hearing anything. In my mind, in my heart, in my soul, it was resonating that look at your friends. And I looked at them. And mind you, my friends are handsome. But I looked at them and I said, they they look dead. And again, I felt the pain in the heart, like a cut again. And then I saw my other two friends because I looked right to the right of me first. I remember and saw, and their faces looked like they were dead, like they were in their caskets and lifeless. And then one more time, I felt like that's how you are. I was like, what? Like I didn't get it. I'm telling you this now. I get it now, but I didn't get it then. Didn't. I got up from that place. For the sake of the interview, I won't get up, but I got up and I told my friends take me home. I felt like weird. I didn't want to go anymore. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to be around anybody no longer. I wanted to deal with what was being told to me, what was happening. And mind you, I have been smoking since I was about 13, 12 years old. So the high was not the high. I was still high. To be frank, I was still high. I left. I got to the car. They took me home at my grandma's to my grandma's house, and I remember that in my head, I'm like, if I show anything that's going on, she's gonna want to talk to me about her God. Like that's literally what I thought. So I walked in, and I had forgotten that she had a surgery. She had had a surgery done to this part of her arms for something that wasn't really that complicated, but she had to have a surgery. And I walked in, and I looked at her, and for some reason, I turn, and she's sitting literally in the living room, and I look at her and I start crying. I just I feel everything that I was told in that room when I seen my friends, and I feel what I'm feeling with my heart, like that cut sensation type feel. And I don't know. I lose it. I start crying. I hated crying because I knew it was gonna prompt someone to want to come talk to me about God at that moment. So I ran to the room that I would stay in. I closed the door, locked it. I have marijuana in my pocket. I have a pipe in my pocket. I smell and reek of marijuana. I can even try to remember the where I was wearing. I was probably wearing like a pro club, and I was close to the winter. It was a white pro club, as a matter of fact. And I stinked, and my eyes were red, and I was crying in that room alone. It was dark. I didn't even turn the light. And little do I know that there was a servant of God in the kitchen at my grandma's house. I don't know. She was there. I hear a knock on my door. I don't want to answer, so I don't. Who is it? And it's a soft, kind voice. It's me, mijo, your prima. It's my prima Juanita. I smile because it was the kindest voice, knowing how I was, who I was. She knew who I was. She knows how I was living. She understood where I was. I was bald headed at this moment already. She had understood everything I had done. I had been already in juvie already by this time. Um, I wanted to invite you somewhere, mijo. It's so vivid. I smile because it's the greatest story in my life. And I opened the door when I said I didn't want to. I opened the door. Her kindness, her sweet kindness. The Lord used for me to twist that knob and open it. And I remember that she looks at me and is like, mijo. And I remember I'm smiling. I I was a dog, remember? I recall that she looks at me and she tells me, mijo. She doesn't even ask me why I'm crying. I'm still crying, mind you. I don't know. I can't stop crying because of what's happening here. And she tells me, I want to invite you. There's a preacher that's coming from Wisconsin. You know what I told her? You might think, oh, so sweet. I told her, you know what? You and your God, búscale. Whoa. I closed the door right away. I don't want to be here about her God, their God, no one's God. I was still dealing with what I was dealing with. She didn't say nothing. She went away. And there I am crying. I'm 20, almost 20 years old, or at least 20 years old, crying over the fact that I'm where I'm at, whatever it is that's going on inside me. I loved the life I lived. Don't get that. I loved the valley, the darkness, the before Christ. I loved it. I couldn't say that without sounding hypocritical. I loved it at that moment. That moment was real and raw for me. It was what I wanted. But God knows best. And not even 10 minutes or so passed. I'm assuming she went to go pray because she came right back. And she knocked very softly again. And again, very kindly said, hey, mijo. I didn't open. Hey, mijo, through the door. I know you don't want to go, but I want to tell you that I'm leaving. I'm going to go pick up my daughter. She's my prima Vanessa. To take her. And I want to take you. Come on. And that thing that I was feeling intensified times 1,000 in the heart. And in my mind, I said, let's go. And when the mind said that, the body went. And I went. I didn't remove none of my items. Like, you already know what I had on me. I removed none of my items. Got in the car. She drove me, stinking as I was. This is a servant of God. She didn't care about nothing else. She took me there. She knew what I needed, and I didn't know. Because God told her. God was trying to tell me. But he had to make me realize the darkness that was just inside me. He had to make me realize that even if I wanted that darkness, it was not what was intended for me, purpose for me at all. It was never meant for me to have been there as long as I had been there, as long as I had enjoyed it, as long as I had entered and left and got in again purposely on my own right. He had to show me first before she invited. And I went, and I'll make those stories short to finish. The preacher did not preach any kind of religious things to me. I still believe to this day that that man was truly, truly a man of God. At that very moment, who knows where he's at now? But at that moment, he was the man of God that God used. And at that very moment, he said, God is a supernatural God. He's a God that is close to you right now, supernaturally. And he said, He is an extraordinary God. And you are an ordinary person. And then a thought came into my head. You're going to be dead like your friends are dead inside. It's always the same thing. Smoke, party, smoke, party, smoke, party, make money, party, make money, women, women, party, all that. Dead. Boring. Everyone was doing it. That's what came to my mind. I got up from my chair, bald headed, stinking. It wasn't even an hour preaching, it was quick. The stuff that I was on that was in my pocket was high quality stuff. I was still under the effect of marijuana. I know it. Feel really high. But I get up. I'm conscious. I was in a slump. I'm understanding what's going on. I get up from that chair. I stand. Everybody's to the front, but because there's still people in the back, obviously, with me included. And I just tell God, if you're real, if you're really real, just change me. I don't know what that means. I don't know even how that feels. I remember though, high as I was, stinky as I was, dirty as I was, my hands dirty from all the dirt that I had done in the streets, from right here, all the way down my body. I felt a fire. I felt this heat that I'm feeling right now. And I start feeling that my heart no longer is being cut. It was being warmed, broken. I remember I started raising my hands because I remember the church times, the times that my mom, my grandma. And I raise my hand and it intensifies. I just remember it intensifying. And any pothead can tell you when they're sober. Any user of anything can tell you when they're no longer on that. And at that very moment, when I surrendered, when Christ rescued me and saved me, found me, I realized that's when God broke my heart. He made a new one from a hardened heart, chipping away at it with His word, chipping away at it with His word, bringing a servant to me, taking me to hear His word, chipping away at His word. His word was chipping at my heart until He finally brought the Spirit of God upon me. Since that day, I have never gone through a decision of a valley like that ever again because I've never gone back. He's never allowed me. I have valleys in my life. I'm going through one right now, but it's never like the ones without Him, without me acknowledging Him being there, knowing that He's there, me telling and talking to Him in my valley. That's it. That's all it is. In this life, in your faith, in your brokenness, and so I don't know where you may be, where you may be in your faith, in your emotion, your mental health, physical health, all that in the above, your relationships, your spouses, your family, all that in the above, all that in the third. All I can say is always know that Christ and you having Him and you being with Him will always let you see the clearness of the darkest valleys. Like I don't care about nothing else. The best advice that I can give you is that in my valley of darkness, there's light. That in my valley of darkness, that even if I call it darkness, God says, where is the dark? He reminds me that I'm foolishly understanding that I don't know him yet. That I'm still getting to know him, that I'm still falling in love with him. Why? Because you're gonna fall in love with him through those valleys. He's gonna remind you, what valley? I'm the light. I'm right here. Where's the dark at? I just pray and I hope that those that are listening always keep Christ in their sight. Because everything's gonna want to blur that vision for you. From everything. People, situations, leaders, everything is gonna want to blur that for you. But you have to stay focused on Christ. That's all.